Hi, everybody. This is Dawn. Just want to welcome you and let you know that we are starting to record the webinar. So please be advised that we will be recording this and it will be available to you in the future. We'll get started in a moment.
All right, well, it is 11:31, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Self-Care for Supported Housing webinar today. My name is Jen Sperduto, and I'm here with my colleague, Dawn Reinhardt-Wood, and we're from the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions at Rutgers University. As Dawn mentioned, I'm just trying to advance my slide. Now I can't do it. Okay. As Dawn mentioned, this session will be recorded, so anything you say can and will be used against you. She also mentioned that this recording will be sent out to you along with the slides. And on the slides today, we have a ton of resources for self-care that can be really, really helpful. So usually the process is after the webinar, anyone who attended will get a copy, a link to the recording and a copy of all the slides. So you will be getting that. Another housekeeping tip is feel free to ask any questions. You can type them into the chat box, but please make sure you change the chat to all panelists and attendees. That way everybody can see your question and not just the panelists. Otherwise, only Dawn and I will see your question, and sometimes it's helpful for everyone else to see it as well. So, any questions before we get started? Madeline, I do see your hand still up. Did you have a question? All right, well, if not, I'm going to lower that. Lower your hand, but feel free to type any questions into the chat box. All right, well, why don't we get started? Today, we're going to be talking about how the impact of the current public health crisis, or how the current public health crisis has impacted supportive housing staff and their well-being. A public health crisis causes distress for all involved, as you know, including providers of behavioral health services. And attending to our own personal well-being during this time is really just as important as supporting the individuals who are receiving services. So this webinar is going to highlight specific tools, strategies, and resources that promote provider well-being. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to pause. Pause is about focusing on being in the present moment without judging what should or shouldn't be happening. When you pause, you slow down just enough to know what's going on. Pause is about becoming aware of your thoughts and your breath. Taking time to focus even for a few minutes, even a few seconds, can help improve mood, decrease anxiety, and lessen the feelings of stress. We all need those skills right now. So let's try a brief practice together before we get started. This may feel a little weird at first, but go with me. Okay, so the first step in practicing pause is to check in with yourself. Just sit quietly and relax. Become aware of the feelings in your body. Notice what it's like to be sitting. You don't have to change anything. Just become aware. How does that feel? The second step of pause is to focus on your breath. Notice the sensations of your breath coming in and then going out. You don't need to change your breath at all. Just be aware of breathing. The third step of pause is to proceed back to your day without rushing. Before you end your practice, refocus on how your body feels. Have any sensations changed? So I just want to check in with you after doing that. Can you describe a word or two, or what word or two describes where you are right now? And feel free to type them in the box. Beach. Oh, I like that one. Calm and content. Thanks, Nicolina. Dawn, can you hear us now?
I can, and now I'm calm and content. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Gray, hibernating in the dead of winter. Sore, tired, stressed, overwhelmed. You guys, I'm just gonna ask you again to change your chat box to where it says all panelists and attendees. That way everybody can see the responses. If it just says all panelists, then just Dawn and I are able to see that. Exhausted, awareness, refocused, internally calm. Thank you, Corinne.
Wow, these sound very familiar.
In need of coffee. Yeah. They do sound awake, envious of that dock on the lake. Yeah. That's a really peaceful scene. I love that picture. Overcast, I do need coffee. Wanting to sit in the sun and sleepy. So hopefully, thank you all for your responses. Hopefully, this brief exercise of pause helped you at least feel a little bit grounded and relaxed. I know it's really early in Washington right now, so maybe you're just getting started with your day. And pause is one of those exercises. It's very simple. It can really be done anywhere in even just a few minutes. It could be in your car. It could be in between tasks before you go into work, or before a meeting, or at the start of your day. It's just a way to help you feel centered and grounded. Yeah, Amy said it was a great reminder to slow down. And that really is what it's about. That's exactly it. It's just slowing down enough to kind of just take a breath, take a step, or it's actually take a pause. We're going to get to the breath, but just slowing down enough to say, okay, I got this, right? Because in our day, we're used to running and rushing, and what we're going to be talking about next is this impact of working from home and becoming teachers of our kids, and things looking very differently, and that could be really stressful. So take a look at this scene. Is this a familiar scene? The scene of a seemingly relaxed person, possibly working remotely from the comforts of their home with their cozy sock and their puppy cuddling and a cappuccino. Really? That's not what my working from home looks like. Yeah, I don't know about you.
So my first question for everybody here is, who stirs their cappuccino with cinnamon sticks?
Again, not me.
Any clean spoon will do. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I don't know about you guys, but doesn't everyone? My working from home situation does not look like that. My coffee at home doesn't look that nice either, Amanda. So the impact of the current crisis really impacts us in a different way than other crises or disasters that we've been through. Natural ones, 9/11. I'm laughing at these comments. They should have had a cat walking across a laptop at a minimum. Absolutely. So this crisis that we're in right now with COVID-19 is completely different than anything that we've experienced in the past. It's not the same as a natural disaster or the disaster that the country went through during 9/11. This time, we're almost all immediately flung into this remote work life. So in addition to managing the associated stressors of COVID-19, of the COVID-19 emergency, we're also managing this new mode of work. And even if you aren't or weren't working remotely, because some housing providers actually just can't, um, based on the nature of your job, our way of working has become vastly different, regardless of whether we're working remotely or not. So this current crisis really impacts everyone, and it presents some very unique challenges with social distancing, remote interactions with both colleagues and clients or service recipients that you're working with. And like I mentioned earlier, we've also had to become teachers for our children, um, you know, parenting in a different way, working in a different way. So it's not just about our work life. The impact of this crisis has really reached far and beyond just our work. And of course, that could be incredibly super stressful. So I'm going to turn it over to Dawn, and she's going to talk about some of those stressors, especially for people that work in supportive housing.
Thank you, Jen. So I'm going to ask, do you sometimes feel as if your day feels a little bit like this in supportive housing? So you're juggling, you're trying to maintain quality, and really in the role that you are all fulfilling on the job, you really do have multiple responsibilities and wear many hats in order to deliver the quality services that your clients should be able to expect, that you expect of yourself, that your organization expects of you. So I want you to think about, your day to day. And as a provider of housing and housing related support services, what are the things that come into your mind that um, you find particularly stressful or challenging? And you can type them into the chat pod. And is there anything that's particularly relevant? I almost said relevant, as my 12-year-old says it, relevant to the current pandemic and a lot of the stuff that's going on socially in our country that has made that possibly even worse. So Grant says case notes. Oh my goodness, yes. I delivered direct services for almost 15 years. And documentation was the bane of my existence. And we all know, working in healthcare, right? What's the famous saying our supervisors tell us? If you didn't document it, it what? Didn't happen? We sure know it happened. We could sure prove that it happened. But if there's not a note, it didn't happen. That's the thing we all love to hear from the Medicaid reviewers and everybody else, right? So and I was famous for saying that also. Yeah, Jamie. So also quality versus quantity. So we were trying to deliver quality services, but oh my goodness, right? It's really hard when you're feeling spread very thin, and that's in your normal day to day. I say normal because really no day out there in the field, as I call it, seems to be normal, because you could be thrown. I mean, it could be like your car, your agency vehicle could break down if you're lucky enough to have one, right? There's always something. I like that. If it ain't writ, it ain't did. I really like that. I'll have to remember that one. Sometimes I needed alternative ways of saying that to some of my staff who really, really slacked off on writing their notes. I'm like, I don't know any other way to say this, but you got to do it. So, and Emily also says having a dual position. So building with a very diverse population, racial and ethnically, as well as age-wise. Oh yes, that's interesting. It's something I think we don't always consider. Ensuring residents follow recommended health and safety protocols due to the pandemic, and residents disregarding it as not enforceable. Great. So yeah, so these things so your jobs were difficult as it was, right? And now you have some things thrown upon you that are that even take precedence, right, over some of your quote unquote normal day-to-day responsibilities, like protecting people's health and safety. You all played that role already, whether you thought about that every day or didn't. And now you're really being expected to do that in a very different way with, as Lorena says, not enough time in the day already. So thank you for sharing some of that. And it reminds me why I said at 40, I had to start to transition out of supportive housing, because I was getting very, very tired because you all do so much. Oh, and that's great too, Matthew. So being nervous about the quality decreasing due to using telehealth or phone meetings with clients. Absolutely, because you all are probably so used to going into the client's residence, right? Going into their environment. If you're visiting folks in a shelter or a transitional place, seeing how they are living is so important as part of the data that you use to do your job. Sometimes even more important than what a person is telling you or not telling you. So you all have these everyday safety fears that you had with your jobs pre-COVID-19. And now on top of it, you have these disease transmission fears, right? You want to protect yourself, your clients, your family, the general public, with not just your clients kind of being adherent or non-adherent to PPE requirements, but also there's folks in the general public who aren't so good at that. And then also all of us worrying about additional economic challenges, right? Not only for our clients who are already living in very difficult economic situations, but it could be for ourselves, our friends, our family members, illness of friends and family or clients, possibly deaths. Unfortunately, working in community mental health, all of us will at some point probably experience the death of a client, and that we may be faced with that challenge right now. And for some folks who haven't had a lot of experience in the field yet, this may be their first. So I do want to put out that plea to all of you to think about your colleagues who are newer or new-ish to the field, or perhaps who have not experienced the death of a client or a coworker. Please keep them in your mind. And if you are someone who has had that experience and been resilient, please think of tapping them and making sure they're okay. So that's another layer, right? Taking care of our colleagues and our own job security. Next slide, please, Jen. Thank you. So some of the signs of distress that are normal and to be expected for a pandemic, for really any type of man-made, I have too many windows. Any type of man-made or natural disaster, we might see these types of signs of distress in any one of us. So one of the things that we really want to stress to all of you today is those signs, those symptoms. I don't even like to call them symptoms. I like to call them indicators of distress, because they are normal, and it's our body's way and our brain's way of saying, hey, look at me and pay attention. So these are some of the normal indicators of distress that we might see during a public health crisis like this, and also during times of other disasters. So these are similar to things we saw during and post 9/11, other natural disasters like hurricanes or tornadoes. And it might be very clear to you that you're experiencing some of these signs of distress. But also it may not be very clear to you, which is why we're doing this today and why your great state of Washington asked us to offer this today, is because sometimes and very often as care providers, we're focused on providing the best quality services that we can, as that previous slide illustrated. And as all of you could come up with all of those things that you need to think of in your day-to-day before COVID-19 hit. Now our worlds have been rocked and turned upside down in numerous ways. And when you are in the thick of a crisis, as a healthcare provider, as a social service provider, or as a first responder, or just as that parent, that friend, that family member who is trying to help others, you may not notice these signs of distress. We'll get to another slide after this that may help you see what this all looks like in yourself, in others, in colleagues, and in your clients. Family members as well. It could be helpful to pay attention to this. So signs of distress, or these indicators of distress, are indicators that not only are the current stressors wearing on you, but they can also contribute to burnout and compassion fatigue. And we'll talk about those in a moment, but first I want to review these signs of distress. So feelings of helplessness or hopelessness. So the idea that nothing's going to get better, why bother, I can't help, or a feeling of shortened future, right? So maybe feeling like, you know what, I'm not gonna make plans for next month for me and my girlfriends to get together, or I'm not gonna make plans for my vacation next year because I had to cancel it this year because I don't even know, are we gonna be here? Am I gonna be able to go, right? So these feelings of really like hopelessness, like nothing's gonna get better. It's been so long already. So we want to be mindful of that. Also feeling like you just may not be able to kind of go to work today, or what's the point, right? What's the point? That question may come up in mind. Hypervigilance. So hypervigilance really gets at our brain is hardwired to keep us alive. But what our brain doesn't do so well after it's been stressed out for a while and been exposed to all this bad stress hormone called cortisol is it really has a very hard time in discerning what's a real lethal threat and what is, I don't want to say just, what is prolonged, unrelenting environmental stress, right? So we as a collective have been through, and you all on the West Coast, even longer than us on the East Coast, have been through a prolonged period of stress, of distress from this pandemic, and then also trying to do your jobs and take care of your family and be teachers to your children and everything else. So when we're exposed to this long-term threat, our brain may process almost any trigger as a threat. So we are staying hyper vigilant. We're constantly scanning the environment for threats. So you may feel keyed up or on edge. You may feel as if you've got reduced creativity. So not just in the creative arts or making music or singing or kind of like or coloring or things that you may have liked to do in the past, but also think about things like your hobbies, things that you like to do in the past that maybe you don't have the energy, you feel like why bother, or you just have lost interest. So that loss of interest in things that used to give us pleasure can also be an indicator of depression as well. And then difficulty listening, right? So difficulty with attentiveness, paying attention, because our mind is just filled with all this other stuff, junk, for lack of a better word, that we're being exposed to from this pandemic. Guilt. So if you know people who have passed away from the pandemic, if you know people who are suffering, if you know people who are, just the folks that you typically serve in your daily day, and maybe you can't deliver the services as you used to. As I believe Matthew said, worrying that telehealth may not be a fair substitute or an equal substitute, at least, for face-to-face contact, right? Feeling that kind of, not only some of us may have survivor's guilt over folks that we may have lost due to the pandemic, but also people may fall through, the fear that folks may fall through the cracks. Generalized fear. I'm going to guess that most people have felt a little bit of that at some point. I remember when it may have been like early February, mid-February. I remember my coworker and I were walking out of the hospital where we work out of, and he's saying, I'm starting to get really worried about this because my wife's traveling. And I said, it's not going to be any big deal. It's not going to be any worse than the flu, right? And that was my way of kind of using that as a defense mechanism. That perspective changed very quickly. But we may also, there may be those among us who use defense mechanisms to hide their fear. So also be mindful of that. Anger and cynicism. So there's a lot of folks that are very critical of the way people are handling this, right? So there's people who are angry because they're feeling like their rights are being taken away. And then there's people that feel as if the government isn't taking it seriously enough, or their neighbors aren't taking it seriously enough, or that we didn't act earlier. So there's a lot of anger and cynicism just around this issue alone. And then difficulty empathizing. So we may have difficulty in feeling for or feeling with other people because of our own level of heightened distress, right? It's hurt people, right? So it's very difficult for a hurt person to be there fully and empathize with another person. And that's why it's so important we pay attention to these indicators. Next slide, Jen, please. And I do see, yeah, Sonia. So I think, so I'm going to read up. So I see, I definitely want to honor your contributions here. So Sonia said, just having to mask up every day is thought-provoking. Absolutely. You know, I think it's become very rote for a lot of us. We put our mask on, or we have to run back to the car before we run into the grocery store because we forgot it. When you really stop to think about it, wow, we're in such a different place than we were in December or January. Lorena says she had a client found dead 2 weeks ago, and yesterday another who was experiencing suicidal ideations. So Lorena, I want to say from me to you, my heart goes out to you and your entire team, your organization, and that person's family and friends. And I hope that the person yesterday who was experiencing suicidal ideation kind of finds the hope and the inspiration that they need right now. So thank you for sharing that. And Jay says that weekly phone contacts, establishing routine for participants. Yeah, absolutely. So really, and what you are doing in trying to establish that routine for your clients is also really great advice for yourself. So one of the things that we know during times of disaster and uncertainty is one of the most important things that we could do for ourselves and for those around us is to encourage routine of some sort. So our lives are definitely altered, at least for the short term, right? Whatever that looks like, short term. That doesn't mean that there aren't certain things that we could do to stick to a routine. So especially humans like routines, and especially children crave routine and structure. They may lead you to believe otherwise, but they really do. And it does, for all of us, helps to reduce anxiety. So I covered a bunch of indicators that may crop up for us during these times, but this is what it might look like, right? So people may say to you, or you may see this in others, that folks just seem more emotional, right? They may have a less thick skin for criticism, or you may feel like you're lashing out. Lack of patience. I know I have encountered this while trying to work from home. I, feel as if everybody in my house should know when I'm on a webinar or know when I'm trying to print things, right? So a lack of patience, isolating, snapping out at people, sometimes even just feeling like this disconnection, like, from what you're doing and how worthwhile is it, right? So it kind of ties back into that hopelessness. So why am I bothering doing what I'm doing when I can't deliver the quality services that I used to? So finding that reconnection with your personal reasons for doing the work that you do despite these challenges is really important. And definitely changes in sleep. So possibly sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, not staying asleep, disturbed sleep. So all of those signs of distress that we looked at on the previous page can also manifest in some physical symptoms. So like problems with sleep, disturbances of appetite. People may eat more, may eat less, it may fluctuate. These are all kind of symptoms or manifestations of that distress. So as we continue to feel these emotions and feel these bodily sensations like anxiety, which may cause headaches and sleep disturbances and all of this, and really kind of overturn our lives, it's very hard for us to feel for others, to be present with others if we're not okay ourselves. It doesn't mean we're going to completely not feel any fear, not feel any anxiety, but it's important that we become aware, that we pay that we pay attention to it, and we begin to manage it and not let it overtake us. Next slide, please. So we want to pause for a moment and ask all of you, what are some ways that you guys and ladies can recognize when you're experiencing some of these signs of distress? Do you have any early warning signs even maybe? What are some of your signs that you're not feeling so well, that maybe the stress of the situation is getting the best of you?
I'll start. I feel
Yes.
like I get really impatient and crabby, snapping at, and Cornelius might feel the same way, snapping at your family,
Oh, yes.
heartbeat goes up, headaches, inability to focus, being impatient. Nicolina, that's me. Thank you. Um, get short fused, having anxiety, loss of empathy. These aren't all mine, you guys. I'm reading everyone else's responses in case you can't see them. Having a lack of motivation, lack of focus, being snappy, ditto, impatient and anxiety,
All of the
feeling
above.
defeated. Yeah, feeling defeated even before the
Yeah.
day starts. That's a good one. Frustrations with constant changes at work. Yeah, it seems like every week
Oh
there's a
my
new
gosh.
plan, a new way of doing things, a new protocol, and everything is just so fluid, it's hard to keep up.
So many here at Rutgers, it's so funny. It's like every week we have to ask our supervisor to clarify yet another letter that came out, another email that came out from some dean, because there's like a million of them at Rutgers, that gives us directions on returning to work or returning to research or returning to this or returning to the campus, and there's all these dates floating around, right? So I was being driven, just driven mad with all these dates. And I just said, you know what? I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going back to any place until my boss absolutely tells me I have to, because you will just become utterly confused. Let's see. And wow. Okay, Jamie. Yeah, great. So thank you. Thank you everybody for sharing. I think that so many have felt these negative thinking, and we're going to talk about the negative thinking, or I think what they call in the AA world, stinking thinking. Yes, all the slides will be shared, and there will be a video recording as well. I'm sorry, Jen, did you want to say something?
No, that's okay. I just saw Alicia said very critical of yourself.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how, when you feel stressed out, how you're able to turn that back on yourself and think, wow, I'm not doing a good job, or something's wrong with me, when it's really not about you at all.
And I want to say something. So like Kyla said, when I start focusing on myself more than my client's needs. So I don't want you to feel guilty about that. And I really, this is something that a lot of us, I think, struggle with. Um, and even as parents, right? What do they say for any of you who have ever flown on an airplane? And I know it's a goofy example, but I really want you all to think about it. You have to put on you have to put on your own face mask. See how I'm trained? You have to put on your own face mask before you can help anybody else. Because if you pass out, you can't help the kid next to you or the passenger next to you, right? And the same goes for your day-to-day jobs and for being a parent and for being a caretaker of older parents. You, right? Jamie, probably not. They probably somewhat may want to pretend that you are robots, that we are robots.
Hello.
Absolutely. I hear you. But I want you guys to please at least be gracious with yourself enough that I'm not saying you have to do that and take care of yourself before others, because I get it. I understand the pressure. But what I'm saying is please let yourself off the hook and be gracious with yourself to know that you need to take care of yourself. Thank you all. And I would say that Jen doesn't have a very good poker face, so it's funny to see her become impatient in Zoom meetings.
I'm sorry, I lost my mute button for a second. Well, this leads us right into our next slide, which is about self-care. And I did hear that comment about my poker face, and Dawn's right. I don't. So you know,
Her
when
eyebrows kind of like end up meeting her hairline.
yeah, you know, it happens. Um, so this, who said it? Kyla, you know, when you start focusing more on yourself than what your clients needs, but that's not a terrible thing. You know, Dawn stole my analogy of the airplane, but you have to put your own oxygen mask on first, and that really is what self-care is all about. So now that we've kind of taken a look at some of you know, the indicators of distress and what that might look like or feel like for you, what do we do about it? How do we address that? You know, we've been hearing this term self-care a lot since the pandemic started, but it really is imperative to be able to take care of yourself so that you can be there and be available to help care for others. I know for me especially, I feel like I don't have direct care service recipients that I work with, but you know, I feel like my it's important for me to make sure that my kid's okay and that my family's okay, and I put their care in in front of my own. And I always have to remind myself of that oxygen mask analogy of, you know, I got to take care of me and work on my own self-care so that I can be a better caregiver for other people. So self-care is really just these planned daily or weekly activities that help manage stress, help you stay balanced, and help cope with challenges. Um, Jay said it's like being in a firefight where you have to secure the area before helping the wounded. Yeah, that's a great analogy too. So being able to see that you need to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. And, you know, even before the current crisis, the work that we do as, Dawn, I see you need to change your chat to all attendees, please. Anyway, so the self-care is important in the work we do, even without the current crisis. You know, we are just in the field that we're caring for people, that we're providing care for others. So even before the current crisis, self-care is something that's really important. And it doesn't just happen, right? We have to make a conscious effort to care for ourselves so that we're able to care for others.
Can I just interject here for one brief second,
Sure.
Jen? I just thought, isn't it interesting how we become so automatic with delivering our services through work? And we really have to think about taking care of ourselves. It just kind of struck me.
Right. And
It's like a muscle we have to work because we're not used
exactly.
to it.
Exactly. It doesn't come automatically. And Amy just said, you know, I struggle to find the time to add a self-care activity. And I agree with that 1,000,000%. So it is a very deliberate and conscious thing that we have to make time for. It doesn't just happen automatically. And the example that we did in the beginning, the pause exercise, I mean, that was a minute I think we spent on that. Even something like that, even slowing yourself down long enough to take that breath, to ground yourself and to center yourself, that's a strategy of self-care. It doesn't take long, but you have to practice doing it. You have to practice making time for that. And I know, Amy, that that's way easier said than done because I struggle with that as well. And yeah, she said, I've had a hard time not working during that moment, during, you know, that we did the exercise. So we're going to try another one, Amy. I'll give you another chance to stop what you're doing and slow down. So let's take a look. So self-care, like we've been talking about, is really necessary to avoid that burnout and the compassion fatigue that many of us face working in this field. And it's working with our colleagues and coworkers, with our service recipients. Maybe some of you are working with landlords and your supervisors, and then of course, our family. But being kind to yourself is really that first step in self-care, and reminding yourself that you need to take that moment, or that 5 minutes, or that half an hour, or whatever that is for you. But self-care can really help, mitigate that day-to-day stress, those automatic thoughts that Dawn mentioned earlier, the things that say, just automatically go to the negative. Um, Self-care can help with trauma, and like I said, the burnout and compassion fatigue, the pressure that we put on ourselves, right? I think that's I feel like I put more pressure on myself than other people put on me. I'm looking at some of the comments. Being able to recognize when accepting another task is too much. Lorena said, I already work overtime without pay when in the office, and I find that it's been worse since working from home, because the work for me is 24/7. Yeah, so I hear like limit setting and boundaries. I think that's a problem that we all run into, being able to, especially working from home. It's really weird, right? It's a weird dynamic. Like, I'll sit at my computer at 7 a.m. sometimes, or maybe it's 8 o'clock at night. So I have to consciously set that boundary of, you know what? I'm not checking my email at 8 p.m. I'm not doing it. And yet Dawn says, I thought I wanted to work from home. I'm not so sure anymore. So while there are some benefits, and, certainly we've all had to adjust, but there's some negatives too. And it really takes some structure and boundary setting, limit setting to do it right. So Amy says she can turn off at 5, but can ruminate while trying to be at home. Yeah, like, these are so great, you guys. I really appreciate your comments and your contributions here, because I think, this is really something that we can all relate to, regardless of the position that we're in, regardless of the job that we do. So while we thought, oh, yay, I can work from home for a little bit, now it's turned into months and months, and it's not the sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns that we thought it might be. So how do we get through that? So let's talk about some self-care strategies. Some of the things that we think are important would be things like limit your news watching. That was something that I had to cut off really early in this process. Mayra said, I try to set a schedule and follow it. I ban news when I enter a room. Yeah, so limit your news watching. That helped me tremendously. I was having nightmares. I was, watching the news before I went to bed, and it was just, gloom and doom. Not that I didn't need to know what was going on, but it did need to be an all-day event. Things like taking walks or exercising, that could be great for self-care. Doing some light reading or laughing, finding something funny. Laughter is good medicine, right? That's why they say it. I hear somebody saying, allow ourselves to say no. Heck yeah. Meditating, praying, journaling, writing, cooking a nice meal. I know a lot of us, without being able to dine out, have done a whole lot of cooking. And for some of us, that's been good, trying new recipes. That's fun. It's kind of finding that silver lining, right? Being with your pets, listening to music, talking with your friends, reaching out to people, staying connected. What else is on your list? What else could be on your list? Gardening. Giselle said, I only watch the weather. That's probably a smart move. Paddleboarding, snuggle my dogs, sewing, designing, being present with the kids and turning your phone off. That's really great. Running with the dogs, working out, doing some home projects. Thanks, Jay. Not procrastinating. driving with the windows down. That's
I just,
amazing, right?
I
It
wanted to comment, Alicia, with you saying your partner, you taking a drive with the windows down. It's so funny because this morning my husband said, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Would you like to go? And I was like, oh yeah, I got so excited. Like it was a night out on the town. And I said, oh, I have to do this webinar. And don't get me wrong, I'm excited to be here, but it's so funny how that getting back to those little things that are normal feels so good right now, like a trip to the grocery store or just a short
Yeah,
drive, which
yeah,
may have been mundane in the past.
yes. I was just about to say, like, it's really given us an opportunity if we try to find the silver linings or the positives in all of this, because we don't have a choice. But it's been an opportunity to notice those little things, right? And be grateful for those smaller things that can bring us peace or comfort or relaxation or Teddy said, I set my phone to softly chime on the hour to remind me to pause, reflect, and center. Oh, yay, that's great. That's great. And that's what we started with, Teddy, was just that pause, and I love the idea of having the reminder, especially for those of us who get too busy or can't seem to make time to do that, even if it's just for 2 minutes, once an hour, or every 2 hours, or whatever your time frame is, but making that time for yourself. So thanks. So these are some great ideas. And also, whoops, sorry about that. And I find that, another silver lining has been to, find those little things. It reminds me of, when you were younger and you got your license, your driver's license, and your mom needed milk and you'd be like, I'll go to the store, I'll run to the store, I'll drive. And now it was such a big deal. Now, not so much. But when the pandemic started, it was like just getting out to go to the grocery store was a big deal, or just going out to take a walk felt really good. So those little things. So let's do another exercise. And Amy, I hope you can hear me. I want you to stop working and take this 1 minute to breathe and do this exercise with us. So we started this webinar with a pause. And that was just really to demonstrate the importance of taking that minute or two to relax, to feel centered, to feel grounded, and to get focused. So let's try another one. This is going to be breathing. Your breathing changes your state of mind. Your breath actually responds to your mind, but your mind can respond to your breath. And you can change the state of your mind and your body by focusing on breathing in specific ways. So as I'm talking, I want you to sync your breathing to this clip. I'm going to hit play. So I want you to breathe in while the shapes are growing and breathe out while the shapes are shrinking. Just a normal breath, not an extended or deep breath, because that'll kind of stimulate our nervous system. Just a regular, calm, normal breath. Breathing can help you relax, feel calmer, and focus, which is especially important when you're in distress or surrounded by chaos. What happens when we relax? We have better judgment. We're less impulsive. When we're anxious, our breathing changes and becomes a signal to our body that our breathing from the chest, which is a signal to our bodies that there's danger, and reinforces our anxiety. When we want to lower our anxiety, we tend to breathe from our diaphragm, and it's difficult to focus on breathing and worrying at the same time. So, how did that feel? Let's do a check-in. Do you feel calmer Were you able to think about work and breathe at the same time? Getting sleepy? Thank you, wonderful, more relaxed, sleepier. I feel more in tune with my body. Now that was a 1-minute exercise. My coffee's finished and I'm awake. Good, forgot to think. And Griselle, that's actually the point of it, right? So it's if you're so focused on your breath and you're so focused, and YouTube has a million of these little, exercises, or even if you don't need the visual, and you just take 1 minute, set a timer, and 1 minute to just focus on breathing. If you're focused on your breath and how it feels going in and how it feels going out, you're not able to think about anything else. I like the visual too, Matthew. I think that's pretty cool. There's lots of ways to do this, and pushed away from my desk and focused on breathing. It felt great. I could feel myself calm down and check in with my body. Again, this was a very, very brief exercise, and one that you can do wherever, in your car, between tasks, on your way to work, on your, before you get in the shower in the morning, like wherever. That took 1 minute, and just that 1 minute to focus on breathing in and breathing out. And there's lots of other ways to kind of connect that with other visuals. Like you could breathe in and visualize this fresh white light coming in. And then when you breathe out and exhale, you can visualize that all that negativity that goes out. So there's lots of different types of breathing exercises that you can do. Corinne just asked about tapping. I actually don't know much about it. I know that I know people who do it and swear by it, but I really don't know anything about it myself. But we are going to, at the end of the webinar, we have a list of resources, apps, mindfulness practice, a gazillion things that you can do. Okisha said she has this on her watch, so she does it throughout the day. That's awesome. Amy says, I tell my clients to do this exercise, but find it difficult to practice myself. I'm always running. Amy, again, this is it's so common, right? That you can tell other people how to do it, but you don't do it for yourself. You have to put your own oxygen mask on. And like Dawn says, don't be so hard on yourself. If one type of self-care strategy doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for everybody. You can find another one, but you have to make that time to do it. Mindy says at home that she practices practice grounding, which is literally standing in the grass barefoot and imagining the energy flow from the earth to your feet. It's very calming. I love that idea. Myra said, I have to try it with my families. Usually they are weirded out. And at first they tell me it helps, and some of them do it regularly. It's not a natural thing, right? Of course it's natural to breathe, but it's not a natural thing to or at least it doesn't feel natural to me either. And that's why in the beginning, when we did our pause, I said, this might feel a little weird at first, but just go with it and see if it can feel helpful. Well, thank you for practicing with me. And I hope that you'll take some of the strategies that we're using today and really apply them, or at least keep trying them. All right. Dawn, I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. So before I move on, I just want to make one brief comment about, I'm sorry, and I'm trying to look in the chat who it was that had a question about tapping. Corinne. So tapping, it's something that I practice as well, is tapping, and it's to manage anxiety and negative thoughts. And so I actually just attended a webinar from the National Council on Behavioral Health and the Joint Commission. And it was presented by a psychiatrist who's a trauma specialist, and it was focused on self-care for frontline healthcare providers. And something that I did not know is there is science behind tapping and other types of rhythmic slight movements to help manage anxiety and hyperarousal. And it's because our brain cannot engage in those rhythmic behaviors and think at that much higher level at the same time. I'm not a neuroscientist, but that's the gist of it. So the idea of tapping or any kind of like rhythmic movements like that, even chewing gum, brings your stress level down. That's why it's advised that you chew gum when you take tests. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but because it helps to bring your stress level down. Your body is just incapable of like going into full-fledged panic mode and doing that rhythmic thing at the same time. So good on you for using tapping. So let's talk about we wanted to kind of boil down being well. So we practice self-care so that we can achieve this state of what we call wellness. And a couple of our colleagues found this resource that really breaks it down to the ABC level. And let me tell you, so for folks like you who are extremely busy, for folks like us who are busy, we need easy, right? So we don't want self-care or trying to maintain your own wellness to feel like another burdensome task. And I know sometimes it does. And so what wellness is really boiling down to is being aware, finding balance, and achieving or maintaining connection. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I want you to like really think about some of the exercises that Jen led us through today. So pausing, right? That's our initial state or initial attempt to try to be aware. We cannot be aware of how we're doing and how we're feeling if we're constantly moving and rushing, right? So pausing, and then that next step of breathing, which is attempting to then regain that balance, right? So slowing our breath down or at least paying more attention to our breath. And having that kind of calming effect on our brain to kind of bring us back more to that state of balance. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be so relaxed once you finish your self-care or your pause or you're taking your breath that you're ready to take a nap, but really we're looking at maintaining balance. So, excuse me. I want to, let's move on to the next slide here. Jen. Thank you. So this awareness, which is first and foremost in our quest to be well and to stay well, is to get in tune with our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. And primarily what tends to come to us first tends to be our thoughts and behaviors. Our thoughts and our feelings. Sometimes we catch ourselves in a behavior and we wonder, why am I doing this? Why am I just started this bag of chips about 10 minutes ago and I'm at the bottom of it now. My goodness, what happened? Right? But usually where we catch or where we become aware is around our thoughts and our feelings. And we're starting this off with a negative example, right? So this is really, if any of you are, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the cognitive behavioral approach to understanding our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, this is really it kind of boiled down. So unfortunately, as people, we tend to have an affinity for negative thoughts, right? I can't do all this. There's just too much to deal with. Life's just not going to get any better. I hate doing this telehealth thing. I don't feel like a good clinician, right? So we have all these negative thoughts. And those negative thoughts are very tightly connected with feelings. So the type of feelings that might arise from those kinds of negative thoughts are things like fear, resentment, right? And then our resulting behaviors, maybe we kind of withdraw because we feel like, I can't possibly help out. I might isolate. Maybe we engage in other problematic behaviors that helped us feel better temporarily in the past. And again, think about these behaviors, right? So stress eating, that's my go-to. Or stress not eating can also be my go-to, where I don't eat. But so like, it does help us feel better in the moment, but then may also trigger feelings of guilt and just questions. Why did I do this again? Right? Or why am I pulling away from people when really what I need is connection? So this illustration is just for you to see how we need to be really mindful of those thoughts and those feelings so that we can prevent some of our harmful coping skills that we may have used in the past, that we can't blame ourselves for them. They've been born out of necessity in all of us, right? We learn these things very early on. And they're self-soothing behaviors, but unfortunately, they can also contribute to health problems and us just generally not feeling so great. Let's see. Thank you, Corinne. So Corinne says it's helped her when she arrives in the morning and I'm already spinning with stress, just sitting in her car for 3 minutes before getting on with the day. I think that that's a great idea. So building those extra, maybe 3 minutes into the day, just to know that, okay, I'm going to ground myself before I go into the building, right? Perfect. Next slide, please. So just as easily as we can fall into the negative track with negative thoughts, we can move ourselves or gently start to nudge ourselves into a positive track. So it's not as easy to do this. Again, we are wired to perceive threats, to perceive negativity, unfortunately. But we can start to retrain ourselves when we hear that voice in our head that says, why bother, right? There's too much to do. We have to actively counter that. And this is where there needs to be a little bit of work and effort on our part into saying, I'm only going to do what I can do today. Self-care is at least as important as my work. And it definitely is, because you can't do your work if you don't practice adequate self-care. Or things like, I will find joy in my day today. So I believe Mindy may have said earlier that she's working in a place where she's connected with the greenery and she can get outdoors. So she may be able to say, you know what, even if the worst comes at me today, I will make an effort to find joy in the day. And take heart. Yeah. So Jay said, take heart in the small things you do. Working in the mental health field, as we all do, I really hope that you never underestimate the little things that you do every day, because they can make all the difference in somebody else's day, life, world moving forward. So please never underestimate that. And yeah, absolutely take joy. And so those kinds of more switching to the positive thoughts lead us to more joyous feelings, more peaceful feelings, at the very least, less anxious and less stressed out. And that's what we're shooting for. You can move on, Jen. Thank you. So, asking ourselves these questions of, and again, I'm going to out myself here by saying I am one of the worst. Maybe I'm not the worst anymore. I was the worst in my 20s and 30s, but I'm pretty bad at taking care of myself. Even at 44, I'm going to admit it. I haven't really caught on to it. And actually, when we were preparing this, I said to Jen, I'm going to volunteer for all the slides that don't have anything to do with actually practicing a mindfulness exercise, because my confidence level in it is so low. And so I'm really grateful to Jen for doing that today, because she did it so masterfully. But, sometimes I find even asking myself these questions feels a little phony. And so we really want you to get used to asking the questions that you feel comfortable with, right? So things like, what is it in my life that I'm grateful for? Who am I connecting with? And they may be people. Like one of the things that I decided to do was to think of one person a day that I haven't talked to in a very long time, because the way that we work is disrupted. So once a day during the work week, I reach out to somebody that I have worked with in the past, that, I was working with up to the pandemic, and just check in with them and find out how they're doing. And it makes me feel better. What can I let go of? So that extra assignment, do I really need to go to the grocery store today? Do I have to squeeze in one more thing today? Probably not. Although if you're in grad school, maybe. Sorry, guys. How can I get outside? So as a couple people said, being in nature helps us. It heals us. So making that quest to get outside, to move when you can, again, moving, being engaged in exercise, and it doesn't have to be strenuous exercise, can improve our mood. And where can I allow beauty to enter my life today? That may be your cat who walks across the computer. It may be that beautiful cup of coffee that I will never have in my home. But really being attentive to where you can and let beauty enter your life.
You know, Sonia makes a really good point. She's saying as she gets older, the older she gets, the better she gets at being mindful of self-care, and feelings of gratitude always helps. And that, I think that just rings so true for me. You know, I think about when I was in my 20s, that really wasn't even a thought. You know, like I didn't think about those things. Certainly there wasn't a pandemic to deal with, but just in general, you know, it was probably not until I became a parent that I really focused on more on self-care. So as we get older, we learn different ways to be mindful, and different ways to, um, you know, care for ourselves. And having that gratitude, as I got older, that was something that was really helpful for me as well, Sonia. Like it helped take the focus off the negative. Like every day you have to find one thing that you're grateful for, whether you just do it in your head or whether you keep a gratitude journal, or but at the end of the day, what's one thing that you could be grateful for? I don't know if that's how you do it, but I think that that's something that can be really really positive. And then I have I base that on the saying of positivity breeds positivity. And the more positive you are, the more positive you are in your thinking, just as Dawn showed with the cognitive behavioral approach, the more positive you are with your thoughts, you know, that just continues to create more positive things. So gratitude is a really important way to do that.
Thank you, Jen. And I did want to say, like, on that note of, as we get older, we tend to be able to take better self-care of ourselves, to pause, to like reflect. And I don't think that's a judgment on myself or yourself or any of us as younger folks, but it is that the more that you experience, the more, I like to say, experiences and losses that you have accrued. I think that you do know how fragile all of this is, right? And I think that a lot of folks are being exposed to that for the first time with this pandemic, and so it is. So I think that it becomes crucial that we take care of ourselves. Okay, next slide, please. So we're gonna talk about resilience now. So when we talk about resilience, and we have this slide here, this mountaineer looking at the next mountain, right? What thoughts come into your mind when we say the word resilient? What does that word mean to you? Or what comes to your mind? Or what experiences maybe? Jen, I think the next slide might have, oh, I'm sorry. Pull back. I'm sorry. Ah! I forgot what the slides were like. Resilience remind you of a blackberry bush? I love
Take a licking
Oh,
and
yeah.
keep on ticking.
Oh my gosh, yes, we planted blackberries like 15 years ago, and I said never again. And then I was silly and I planted bamboo, and now we have bamboo all over our yard. Bamboo is resilient too. Yeah,
Keep cutting it down, it keeps coming back.
Yeah, one of the most resilient fruit bushes out there.
Dandelions are resilient. Yes, my gosh, Amy. You should see my yard in the beginning of spring.
Yeah. Thin air. Grant says thin air. It reminds him of thin air.
Overcoming obstacles and still standing.
Yeah.
You know, for me, I'm a big Rocky fan. For those of you
Yes.
that know the Rocky movie, and I think one of the quotes is, "It doesn't matter how many times you get
It's
hit,
getting back up.
it's how many times you get hit and keep getting back up."
As a
He
South
says a little
Jersey
bit more
Philly girl,
eloquently
yes.
than me, I'm sure, but
Yeah. No, it's about how many times you get back up. As someone who's a South Jersey Philly girl, you know that movie. Grass in the Concrete. Great, Alicia. These are great. You know what? We're going to have to get some more clip art, I think. Yeah, so next slide, Jen. These are great. You guys say it better than we can. So resilience is about being able to pick ourselves back up and come through or move through that challenge, right? So things stink right now. And you know, things really were bad like a month ago or 2 months ago. They're letting up a little bit, right? And so I think sometimes it's also really important to remember where we've been, what and where we were, what we've been through, what we're still going through, to realize where our future can be, and that we are changed people. And that is what these kinds of experiences do to us. It can change us in some ways for the negative, right? At least temporarily. But our goal is that going through these types of difficult experiences, whether it's COVID-19 or anything else that we're facing right now, or you've ever faced in your life, that you are learning something through it, and that you might be able to actually smile and be kind to yourself during it, right? So resilience is also like building a muscle, because you have to practice it every single day. So especially when we are in the thick of this current crisis, realizing ways and strategies that we can use to keep ourselves thriving and learning and relying on our strengths. Someone's dog is hungry. We all know Jen's dog very well. He's don't make him angry. He'll
I'm
ruin
sorry, you guys. I thought I
he'll
was
ruin your
muted.
HVAC system.
Oh, don't even.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So all of the self-care tips and primers that we helped you through today, the exercises, were really intended to help you start to build your own skills for resiliency. So knowing that resiliency is ultimately a muscle that we have to work, because as you see, how easy was it for us to, no, you can absolutely, Grant, I want to answer that right away. You're going to get this presentation, PowerPoint, and the video recording. When you get the video is going to be through a link on a cloud, but you can download it locally to your computer and play it for your staff. Your wonderful state of Washington paid for this, you can use it. Okay. So, you know, it's really important that we practice those skills. Okay, Jen,
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you will get the presentation for sure, and you will have the link to the cloud recording, but you will not have it in a way that you can alter it.
Yes.
So you can't alter it, but you can have it. You can have the recording of the entire webinar, and you'll have the slides, but it'll be in a PDF form, so you won't be able to use that material that way. But you can show the webinar as many times as you'd like.
And you will have a bazillion. I think we have almost as many resource pages at the back of this as we have slides for presentation. So you will have a ton of resources that you can actually recommend, use with your staff, use with clients. So, Jen, I think you're up.
Yes.
Oh.
So
I'm sorry, I didn't know if this was you or me.
I thought it was you, so
I can go through.
Okay.
Sorry. So in our quest for resiliency, a few of the things that we really strongly recommend that you practice. And again, some of these, it sounds like many of you are already doing it, right? So it's not adding another thing to your day. But things like, I'm going to tackle perspective. So maintaining that perspective that all things don't stink, right? And that hopefully this is something that's short term and will pass, and things may look differently in the future. But I can control the things that are immediately around me, and I can control my reaction to what's going on, right? So achieving perspective. We should also strive to look at silver linings. I know that's very difficult, and some people don't, may feel like that minimizes the current pandemic. But, sometimes we do discover strengths within adversity. And that's one of the things that we like to encourage people to look at is, have you acquired any new strengths during this time? Or did this time force you to adapt your work or adapt your life in such a way that you created a new skill? And we'll get to one of ours in a couple of minutes. Engaging in expressive writing. So when we say that, journaling, right? So just journaling to express yourself, getting it out on paper, getting it down, or even just making a voice recording on your phone. Some way to express how you were feeling. And then at the core of this is creating a resiliency plan, listing your personal strengths that improve your resilience. So maybe in the past you had a physical challenge and, it took you a long time, but you regained, strength, and you regained skill. And so listing those things that have helped you get through in the past. Writing down 3 to 5 steps that you could take right now that could enhance your resilience. It may be those simple things that we don't find so simple, like saying no to extra stuff, like vowing to yourself you'll go to sleep 15 minutes earlier tonight. So, just being engaged in these types of self-reflection can really help build our resilience.
So I'm losing my mute button. Am I on, Dawn?
You're on.
Okay, good. That's why I can't find my mute button. So one of these silver linings is actually this website. And I'm sorry, this is a very shameless plug on Dawn's and my behalf. So Dawn and I are part of the Rutgers State Hospital Psychiatric Rehabilitation Initiative. So what that means is that we are consultants at New Jersey State Psychiatric Hospitals. Corinne, I see you have to leave. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your contributions. So anyway, our project consults at the state psychiatric hospitals in New Jersey. There's 4 of them. Dawn's at one, I'm at another. And since March, we've all been working from home. And out of necessity, in staying in contact and supporting our stakeholders for the Department of Health, the hospital employees, and other community providers, we created this website that has a myriad of resources. Some are related to COVID-19, some are about self-care. There's an entire section on mindfulness practice with a daily practice posted every single day. There's virtual support groups. There's online trainings that you can take and receive a certificate of completion afterwards. And this is available to you. Jay, thanks for coming. Anybody is welcome to check out our site. So if you go to sites.rutgers.edu/shpri/, you can have access to all of these things too. So the State Hospital Psychiatric Rehabilitation Initiative, like I mentioned, is comprised of a team of psychiatric rehabilitation faculty who serve as consultants and trainers at the state hospitals. So the content of this website is free for you to access. There's lots of resources in terms of training, virtual support groups, self-care materials, webinars, mindfulness. We find it really helpful. I hope you do too. Cornelius, thanks for coming on. Take care. Bye, Terry. Thank you. So that's one resource that we're really interested or really excited to share with you, because I think it has a lot of stuff on there that could be really helpful. All right, so that was our shameless plug. So let's hear back from you. Think about all the things that we talked about today, the different strategies that we talked about for self-care and breathing and pausing and building resilience and having gratitude. What's one thing that you're going to take away from today and say, you know what, I'm going to try that. That's new to me. Or I'm going to try to make more time. Or what will you do today for self-care? And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you learned here in this webinar, but think about and make a commitment today to do one thing for yourself. What would that be? Sit near some water and breathe. I love it. Focus on positives. Take a walk while listening to music. Great one, Sonia. What else, you guys? Walk. I was just going to ask Amy, what were you going to do? Okay, Amy's going to walk, and she's not going to think about work while she's walking, right? Color and doodle. That's a good one. That, you know, Alicia, that's a great strategy, because while you're doing that, what are you thinking about? Nothing, right? It's one of those, I don't want to say mindless, but you have to, you know, you're concentrating on that and you're not thinking about other things. Make a new caftan. I plan on working on saying no to extras. That's great, Myra. Work out. I'm going camping. Beautiful. Allow myself to acknowledge my feelings. These are so good. These are so good. And if you don't want to share one, that's okay. But I hope you at least are thinking about something that you can do for yourself today. I'm going to work in my front yard. I have to move my box over so that I can work on a time-sensitive project without being interrupted in the office. Great. Oh, a massage appointment. Beautiful. With a mask, yes. With my clients, I've been singing. They always leave smiles. So maybe a morning sing on the way to work would help raise spirits. I love that. That's great. That's great. I'm so glad. These are some really wonderful ideas. And you know, I love being able to share them, because there's things that I haven't thought about that might be different or unique that I might really love, or that I might find really helpful. So I hope that you're able to do those things and make that time, even if it's a minute or 5 or 30 or 60, whatever that is. I hope you're able to really consciously and intentionally carve out that time for yourself to take care of you. And I'd like to be in that hammock right now. Music in the car is something that I do too. Me too. I crank it up. Music is a really big one for me. So let's take a minute. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to open this up for any questions, thoughts, feelings about this. And then I want to just briefly show you what resources, the resource slides and what we have available. So when you get the slides, you'll have access to all of that. Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate that. Anybody have any questions or thoughts? Well, you know what, as you're typing them or thinking about that, oh, you're welcome, Emily. I'm going to show you some of the pages that we have. Bye, Lorena. Thank you. Information on dealing with burnout. We actually did a webinar recently for Washington about burnout and compassion fatigue, I believe.
Yeah.
Also, Mindy, if you go to that Rutgers website, if you go to the tab that says online trainings, there's a really great online training about burnout and compassion fatigue. And it's really good. It's one of our colleagues, Ken Kinter, presented it, and it's a really fantastic training. It's only about 20 minutes, but it gives a really great overview. Oh, thank you, Lisa. So let me go through just to summarize, self-care are the things that we do to keep going, right? That resiliency to keep bouncing back by using those strengths and skills and positivity. And we learned about different strategies for self-care, pausing and breathing, along with awareness and finding balance and staying connected are really simple strategies for self-care. So I'm going to just go through these very briefly because we only have about 5 minutes left. Here's some additional self-care suggestions. These are a lot of things that we actually talked about. Some very practical tips. And then we have a page that has some wellness self-assessments. So there's the professional quality of life measure, and there's also the self-care assessment from Therapist Aid. Just kind of give you an idea of to check in with yourself and see where you are and how you're doing. You could also use these with your clients as well. This is another page of resources. Another page of resources. The next 2 pages are some free downloadable apps that can be used for self-care. I think we've all heard of the one Calm, but there's lots of other really good ones. Headspace, Insight Timer, Down Dog Yoga. There's Happify and Breathe to Relax. And Corinne, I know Corinne left, but here's a Tapping Solution Meditations. So there's lots of other, lots of things that are available. And, here's some numbers that might be helpful for people. If you or someone you know or someone you work with needs that little bit of extra help because of these overwhelming feelings, here's some resources for you. So again, you will, and our contact information, mine and Dawn's, is on here as well. And like we mentioned, you'll absolutely be getting the slides and the link to the recording for the webinar. So you'll have all of this at your disposal that you can use. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? I want to thank everybody for going through the exercises with us and participating, and all of your comments and contributions and ideas and suggestions were really, really valuable. So thank you for that. Dawn, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
I have nothing to add, only to thank all of you for the work that you have done and continue to do on behalf of some of the most vulnerable citizens in our country. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you for your perseverance throughout this pandemic, and just want to remind you to take care of yourselves because you are so valuable. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Amy. I'm glad it was helpful. Thanks, Erin. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your comments. Keep on keeping on.